Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. This is a new presentation from www.central-mosque.com and the Humble Heart YouTube channel. Before I begin, I did a video recently on the concept of Murti Puja or idol worship in Hinduism, and the link is right here in the top right hand corner and will stay visible throughout this presentation, so feel free to visit that because this is a continuation of the concepts that I discussed in the previous video. The topic today is energy, matter, Hinduism, and God. So let's dive right in. So there are a few concepts in Hinduism and Buddhism that you need to understand. So there's a concept of Atman, which means soul or spirit, and it is part of the spirit of Brahman. And then there's Jivatman. So Jiv in Sanskrit means to breathe. So Jivatman means basically, when a soul is captured in a mind or a body or structured, is called Jivatman. So in Hinduism, Atman remains the same, but Jivatman gets reincarnated, so gets a new body. So that's the concept of reincarnation in Hinduism, that Jivatman gets reincarnated into a new body. Buddhism and Hinduism had a conflict, about 1200 years ago or so in India. And there was a person in India, Adi Shankara, who revived Hinduism in India. And the concept had a lot to do with the conflict between Atman and Jivatman, between Hinduism and Buddhism. I just want to leave it at that because I don't want to make it too complicated for people to understand. Just wanted to give the background of that. Buddhism has rebirth. Hinduism has reincarnation. So that is a subtle difference between the two theologies. When it comes to Hinduism, and these are some of the highest principles of Hinduism, and they believe that energy is infinite, matter is infinite, universe is infinite, God is infinite. And infinite, in colloquial English terms, they actually mean eternal. Okay, so what they mean is matter is eternal, and God simply uses the pre-existing matter for creation and just changes the forms from one to another, right? This is the most highest form of belief in Hinduism. Of course, it contrasts with Islam, which we'll talk about in a second. And they give examples of that. They say, listen, if you look at the simplest example, if you look at a nuclear explosion, it has a lot of condensed matter. The matter then converts into energy, and that energy is the destruction of the bomb. They also talk about Big Bang, and they say, Hindus who they keep on giving the examples of the laws of thermodynamics, and they say energy can never be created nor be destroyed, and energy is stayed neutral throughout the universe. And they give the example of Big Bang and saying, hey, Big Bang gave it started the concept, the energy was released, and the energy simply changes forms. When you ask any Hindu who is knowledgeable in their religion, and the reason I'm doing these videos is when they say that their belief is in agreement with rationalism or science, that's the premise that I am disagreeing with, right? If we were living in an Islamic society, it gives us right to everybody to worship the religion of their choice. There's no problem with that. The problem is when someone says that, hey, my religion is the only one that is in agreement with logic or rationale and stuff, that has to be questioned. So when you ask them the evidence, okay, what's your evidence that energy is eternal, matter is eternal, just like God? So as I said, they give you an example of the law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. They give you an example of Big Bang. Those are not really evidence, because you say, okay, that's not really the evidence that energy is eternal. Okay. So when you say that, so give me evidence, and the argument, completely dissolves and dilutes into, they start attacking Islam. Why did the Prophet, peace be upon him, marry a 9-year-old? Why do Muslims worship the cube in Mecca, etc., etc., etc.? So there's literally no evidence put forth as to what is the evidence that matter is eternal and energy is eternal. Okay, so what are the arguments against this? So the first argument is this limits the power of God. So you're trying to understand God from a perspective of a human. So imagine if I built a chair. So in order for me to build a chair like this, very simple chair, I need some wood, I need some tools, I need to have the knowledge to be able to build the chair. So therefore, my powers of creation, quote unquote, are limited. God is supreme. God has no limitations. So I'm trying to put limitations on God, that God needed matter to create. So this, of course, is sharply contrasts and contradicts the Islamic concept of God, where Allah Ta'ala says in Quran, chapter 36, verse number 82, verily his command when he intends a thing is only that he says so, be, and it is. Kun fayakun. So when God, in the concept of Islam, Allah Ta'ala wants to create something, Allah does not need something to exist because humans do. I need to create whatever I create. I do a little drawing, I need a paper and pencil. In order to do that, God has no requirement for something to exist. God can create out of nothing. Kun fayakun. That's the first problem. Second, the concept is also against science. So when Muslims propose this argument that, hey, God created out of nothing, the Hindus say that's not possible, that's not rational. Forget about rationality. It can be proven according to science. Now, I am not saying that Islam is using this argument. I'm simply saying that even in the limited human understanding of science, what we know now, it is possible to create something out of nothing. There's a principle. And this guy, Julian Schwinger, came up with this principle in the 1950s, I believe. It's called the Schwinger effect. And he basically talked about creation out of nothing. So very recently, scientists were able to create this. Scientists were able to create matter out of nothing. Now, once this is put to some Hindus and they argue, okay, if humans can also create out of nothing, and then God can also create out of nothing, then what's the difference between humans and God? The difference is that humans were able to do that after decades of experimentation in a limited capacity in controlled circumstances, versus God has created this universe all around you. So I am looking outside my window while I'm talking to you today, and I'm looking at the sky. Everything around me is a creation of God at a massive scale. This is just a simplistic argument that it is possible to create matter out of nothing. So God did not need matter to be eternal, or energy to be eternal or infinite, as the Hindus say in India, to create anything. That's the only argument I'm making here, that humans have been able to do this. Third, when the Big Bang argument is put forth, Big Bang, the scientific community agrees that Big Bang is not a theory to explain creation. It actually explains what happens after the Big Bang. So, universe is expanding, universe is cooling and expanding, etc. So the Big Bang theory kind of explains what happens. Big Bang does not explain the cosmic creation at all, right? So you cannot put Big Bang to say it explains creation. That does not work. Fourth, there's deductive reasoning here in place. So let me try to put this as an example. So we all agree that everything which begins must have a cause. Fine. There's uniformity of understanding between scientists. The universe has a beginning. So when you put forth a Big Bang, that means it has a beginning. So when you put 1 and 2 together, therefore universe must have a cause. Universe must have a beginning. Let's call it a cause. That has a cause. Then you take it back, and that has a cause. That has a cause. That has a cause. You will keep going, forever, trying to say this has a cause, this has. The only way to break that cycle is to say that something created something, did something which didn't have a beginning, didn't have a cause, was creative, and was powerful enough. Otherwise, you will infinitely keep talking about cause and cause and cause and cause and cause. This is the highest level of argument in mathematics, deductive reasoning, right? And you cannot fault that. You cannot go against it. So something has to have happened which had no beginning. Otherwise, if everything had a beginning, then you'll keep going and keep going and keep going forever. So matter and energy is a creation. Science understands it. As we know now, science understands it. Therefore, a creator cannot be contained within the creation or limited by the creation. So if God and matter have always existed in eternal, that's a contradiction, because then who came first? What happens? Then, and when you say God needs matter to create, you're limiting the powers of the creation, versus that's not a creator. That's within a creation. That doesn't make any sense. Anything that's contained within something is subservient to it, dependent on it, contained within it, limited by it. And that is not the way to define a creator. So before I leave, let me tell you how Islam explains the concept of creator. Chapter 112 in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, very famous, very short. Google it. Surah Chapter 112, Surah Ikhlas, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Say, O Prophet, peace be upon him, he is Allah, one and indivisible. Allah, the sustainer, needed by all. He has never had any offspring, nor was he born, nor is there to him any equivalent. This is a continuation of the previous topic on idol worship, because whenever you start to represent creator by an image, it is disrespectful to that creator, because you are limiting it. You are limiting the powers of that creator by representing it in some human capacity. You need to change your way of thinking, saying, I am imposing human limitations on God. So humans need raw material, practice, tools, knowledge to create something. If you begin to think of the creator the same way, then you're limiting the creator. The creator is no longer divine. If you believe that energy has pre-existed and simply changes forms, matter has also pre-existed, just changes forms, God has pre-existed and God needs this matter, which is part of the belief of Hinduism, then you're limiting God, because God then needs matter and energy to be able to create. Simply changing forms is nothing. On a very crude and simplistic levels, humans can create and change forms, right? There's a tree growing, I can chop it up, make it into wood, process it, then take tools and fashion the wood that came from the tree into a chair. When I paint that chair, it looks very beautiful, nicely finished, put it next to the tree. What have I actually done? All I've done is taken the wood, enhanced it, fashioned it into a chair. That is my limitation. God is not limited by those limitations. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.